Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. We are on page 338. The paragraph begins with the following sentence: the supreme truth aspect which thus manifests itself.
We are in the chapter Brahman Purusha Ishvara Maya Prakriti Shakti. This is one of those chapters which are very long and quite complicated, but we will. We already gave you a brief summary of it, okay? And we will very quickly summarize again, because you have to understand that Brahman, Purusha, Ishvara are the same thing seen from different planes of consciousness. And the corresponding, if you consider spirit and matter, spirit appears at one level in something, another level as something else, and at the supreme level something else. And the corresponding matter also appears different corresponding to that same, the Purusha and the Prakriti. There is a correspondence between the two. So, if you go silence your mind and go into the higher mind, you experience the nirvana consciousness, the self. Your mind is normally silent. Even if it is not silent, you are not identified with your mind, and there are just small ripples on the surface of your consciousness, and you are only watching from above. And you are identified with, you are experiencing the Sat aspect of Sat Chit Ananda. And when you are seeing the Sat, okay, the substance which is true, that consciousness is so true that the spirit appears to be absolutely an illusion. So you have the experience of Brahman, and you are watching Maya, the illusion of the world. This is the first experience that you can have. This is what Sriram also had, and Shankar also had. Everybody has this experience. Then, when your consciousness rises to slightly different level, this consciousness which is impersonal, the Brahman consciousness is impersonal, infinite, static. It is impersonal. But if you wait patiently and your consciousness climbs to slightly another level, that consciousness becomes a personal consciousness. It becomes a conscious being. It's not an impersonality anymore. So it becomes a Purusha. When you go to the Purusha consciousness, the corresponding Prakriti aspect is mechanical energy. It's not an illusion anymore. You see it as mechanical energy. It is true, but it is mechanical energy. The river is flowing, the wind is blowing, the sunlight is coming. No consciousness anywhere. Mechanical, unconscious movement. This is corresponding to the Purusha and Prakriti aspect. If you go to a still higher level, you experience the Ishvara consciousness. You become the master. There you have the impersonal aspect as well as the personal aspect. You experience both, and at that time the movement and the power that you are seeing, first as illusion, then as mechanical energy, is neither of them now, but it becomes your own power over which you have full lordship and mastery. So these are the three levels.
In the levels of the mind that we've covered many times.
That's right.
Where do these experiences occur?
That's not very clearly defined, because it can happen at any level depending on the individual. Mm-hmm. So that is not, you can't say that the Purusha consciousness is at this level. You can't say that the Nirvana consciousness is at this level. When you go into the superconscient, there are levels. But it's not like a staircase that at this level you will have this experience, this level you will have this experience. It's more a ramp than a staircase. So there is an interpenetration of the planes. You can even have the experience, glimpses of the supermind in the spiritual planes of consciousness. You don't need to go there absolutely. You can have a glimpse of it. That means part of your consciousness has gone there, but it can come back. So you can't locate it exactly. The same problem with the psychic being. There is no particular plane corresponding to the psychic residence, if you want. When the psychic being goes into the superconscious planes, you can't say it is such and such a place, not geographically located. Okay?
Very good. Yes.
But the Ishvara consciousness is at the summit, is the supermind. The others can vary in the spiritual planes of consciousness. I told you, level 1, matter, life, mind. Level 2, the spiritual planes of consciousness, where you are not identified with the body, mind, life. Sri Aurobindo divides them into 4. Others can divide it into more if they want. But the higher mind, the illumined mind, the intuitive mind, and the overmind, each one having characteristics. The higher mind becomes like a broad daylight. The normal mind of man, Sri Aurobindo describes as a candlelit room. You have to struggle to see things and understand things. You have to use your mental galley slave labor. He loves that word.
Yes.
Okay? And when you go to the higher mind, it's like a broad daylight. You go to the illumined mind and intuitive mind, it becomes lightning intense. Like lightning, the light becomes that intense. And when you go into the overmind level, that's your whole another level altogether. You are almost at the supermental level, one step away from the supermind. The overmind and the supermind are divided by the golden lid, which mother broke. Okay? So, whether the golden lid still exists, I can't say. But I don't think so, because it was broken. And then the light came down and continuing to come down.
How many of the great disciples of the ashram were lived in the overmind?
Definitely, Nolnida was definitely there. There's no doubt about it. And some others may have had glimpses of it. But the one in which there is a record of his having a glimpse of it, I told you, he lost his head. He lost his mind.
Yes, you told me.
And he went away from there. Okay. So now, Sri Aurobindo is described in the previous chapter, the Brahman consciousness. It is something impersonal, it is something infinite, eternal, and ineffable. And although we can't conceive of it or speak of it in mental terms, one can experience it. We can identify ourselves with it. That's what he's saying. And if you want to at all describe it in mental terms, you need a language which is flexible and it can be hammered into suggestions. That's what he has said in the previous para. Okay?
Mother also said that about truth.
Yes.
It could not be explained in mental terms. It had to be lived.
That's right. The higher, from the spiritual planes of consciousness onwards, the consciousness is not subject to words and language. It goes beyond that. Okay? So now we'll read the para that we have to read today. The supreme truth aspect, which thus manifests itself to us, is an eternal and infinite and absolute self-existence, self-awareness, self-delight of being. I'll read the whole para first. This founds all things and secretly supports and pervades all things. This self-existence reveals itself again in 3 terms of its essential nature: self, conscious being or spirit, and God or the divine being. The Indian terms are more satisfactory. Brahman, the reality, is Atman, Purusha, Ishvara. For these terms grew from a root of intuition, and while they have a comprehensive preciseness, are capable of a plastic application which avoids both vagueness in the use and the rigid snare of a too limiting intellectual concept. The supreme Brahman is that which in Western metaphysics is called the Absolute. But Brahman is at the same time the omnipresent reality in which all that is relative exists as its forms or its movements. This is an absolute which takes all relativities in its embrace. So it is slightly differing from the Western idea. The Upanishads affirm that all this is the Brahman. Mind is Brahman, life is Brahman, matter is Brahman. Addressing Vayu, the Lord of air, of life, it is said, O Vayu, thou art manifest Brahman. And pointing to man and beast and bird and insect, each separately is identified with a one. O Brahman, thou art this old man and boy and girl, this bird, this insect. Brahman is a consciousness that knows itself in all that exists. Brahman is a force that sustains the power of God and Titan and demon, the force that acts in man and animal and the forms and energies of nature. Brahman is the Ananda, the supreme bliss of existence, which is the ether of our being and without which none could breathe or live. Brahman is the inner soul in all. It has taken a form in correspondence with each created form which it inhabits. The Lord of beings is that which is conscious in the conscious being. But he is also the conscious in inconscient things, the one who is master and in control of the many that are passive in the hands of force nature. He is the timeless and time. He is space and all that is in space. He is causality and the cause and the effect. He is a thinker and his thought, the warrior and his courage, the gambler and his dice throw. All realities and all aspects and all semblances are the Brahman. Brahman is the absolute, the transcendent and incommunicable, the supracosmic existence that sustains the cosmos, the cosmic self that upholds all beings. But it is too the self of each individual. The soul or psychic entity is an eternal portion of the Ishvara. It is his supreme nature of conscious force that has become the living being in a world of living beings. The Brahman alone is, and because of it, all are. For all are the Brahman. This reality is the reality of everything that we see in self and nature. Brahman, the Ishvara, is all this by his Yoga Maya, by the power of his conscious force put out in self-manifestation. He is a conscious being, soul, spirit, Purusha, and it is by his nature, the force of his conscious self-existence, that he is all things. He is the Ishvara, the omniscient and omnipotent all-ruler, and it is by his Shakti, his power of conscious power, by Shakti, his conscious power, that he manifests himself in time and governs the universe. These and similar statements taken together are all comprehensive. It is possible for the mind to cut and select, to build a closed system and explain away all that does not fit within it. But it is on the complete and many-sided statement that we must take our stand if we have to acquire an integral knowledge. So, pretty complex, but that's why I gave you the three stages. Now we'll identify what he's saying. Okay? He is quoting heavily from the Gita and the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Taittiriya also. He is quoting also from the Taittiriya. Okay. The supreme truth aspect, the absolute summit, the Ishvara consciousness, the divine who is personal and impersonal, that's a supreme truth aspect, which thus manifests itself to us, is an eternal and infinite and absolute self-existence, self-awareness, self-delight of being. We must give full value to the word self. Okay. My body exists because of matter. My mind exists because of the universal plane of mind. My vital exists because there is a universal pranic. It is dependent. But this is self-existent. It is not created. It exists by itself. So when he says self-existent, we have to give full value to that. It is not created by anybody, and neither does it depend on anybody. It is unconditioned. Okay? So self-existence and existence, the word is, you can take it as the subtlest of substance. Sri Aurobindo uses the word matter when he means that substance to be very gross in the form of matter. And when he uses the word substance, it includes anything material, but from the grossest level to the highest level. And when he uses the word existence, he means the subtlest of substance. So, this we have to be clear about. Self-existence. Existence is not something vague and a mental concept. It is subtle substance. The divine is substance. He is subtle substance, which he manipulates and molds that into the universe. Out of that, he makes all the things in the universe. So, he is self-existence, but he is also self-awareness. The consciousness not coming from anywhere else. He himself is conscious. He is the source of all consciousness, rather. Okay? And exactly in the same way, self-awareness, self-delight. Self-delight is easy to understand because our delight is always dependent on something. If I eat something pleasant, I am delighted. If someone praises me, I am delighted. It is conditional. And it starts in time and ends in time. But self-existence, there is no beginning and no end. It is eternal and it is not caused by anything. That is self-delight. It exists by itself. So these three words, existence, awareness and delight, you get back to the idea of Satchidananda. Okay? Sat is often translated as truth, but if you see very carefully, existence and truth are really the same thing. Because that which exists is the truth. If it doesn't exist, it's not the truth. So something which exists is the truth. Okay? So.
But how then do people understand war and hatred? On a mental level, no doubt. But they attribute that to the divine.
Yes, because the substance there, we must remember a few things always, and then this will explain so many things. At the highest level, we have the One, Brahman, and he is everything else. Just now that huge para that we read, he's saying he is insect, he is bird, he is girl, he is boy, he is old man, he is everything. So, but how does he become everything? By manifestation, by making his subtle substance in degrees and gradations more and more dense, less and less subtle, until finally you have matter at the lowest level. It's the same thing. And this we can picture to ourselves with the very easy example of ice, water, water vapor. It's the same substance, but taking three different forms. Matter is ice, the mental and vital worlds are water, and the highest is the water vapor. You can explain it that way. So it's the same thing. So war and this is the emotions that are at the lowest level. They are you can also say that there is a distortion and there is a dirtiness that comes in. Density is dirtiness. There is no clarity. So that is where war and hatred and all these things come in. Okay? There is another way of looking at it, and that is the dualities. When the divine creates, he creates infinitely. He doesn't create only a particular section of things. He creates infinitely. If he creates light, he will create the intensest light possible and the darkest darkness possible. Because that's also light, absence of light. So when he does that, he'll create love, but he also creates at the same time hate, because it's the same thing at the other end of the pole. So that's why when you go to the spiritual planes of consciousness, morality disappears. You start seeing that love and hate are the same thing. You have to go beyond both. You have to go beyond good and evil. And then you see that they are only two poles of the same vibration. So, war and we, that's a problem that always comes up. So that is, from the spiritual point of view, there is no difference between cruelty and kindness.
I've just begun recording War and Self-Determination.
Okay.
And Sri Aurobindo is very clear that we cannot see each other as brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
That's not sufficient. We cannot even see them as family, but we have to see them as one.
Yeah, that's right. But not at this level.
No.
You have to go to the higher level and see them as one. At this level, if you see them as one, you are in trouble. Because a friend and an enemy, you can't see them equally and treat them equally. So it depends at which level you are, and the truths of that level are applicable to you. Don't apply the other truths to your lower level. Then you are in trouble. Okay, so self-existence. So, and self-awareness, delight of being. This founds all things, creates a foundation. This founds all things and secretly supports and pervades all things. So now look at the three words. First of all, it's a foundation. In other words, it's the origin. Okay? Foundation from below. Normally, use the word foundation for something, the foundation. But it's the support of everything. Then, it is secretly supports. So, okay. And finally, the word is pervades. So, when it is founding, it's a transcendent. That's the origin of everything. Then it pervades the universe. It creates a universe and pervades into everything. Okay? And the pervading is the last, and supports the universe. So, in the universal, the Supreme creates a universe, and the universe creates the individual forms. So, you have three forms: transcendent, universal, and individual, and the divine is there in all. In the transcendent, he is there without the manifestation, without the world. And in the world, he is there, and he is there secretly supporting it. So, secretly supporting. There is divine presence everywhere. The fourth chapter, I think, in the Life Divine, reality omnipresent. The reality is there everywhere in the physical world, we don't see it, but it is there hiding behind the forms. Then it enters into each form. That's the pervades all things. That's the individual. He is there in the stone, he is there in everything. So this Brahman is there everywhere. So for the mental consciousness, it's very difficult to understand. That's why that image of the ice, water vapor helps. He is there everything. He takes different forms in different worlds. Okay?
But he says secretly supports.
Yes, because you don't see it. But if I can see it, it's not secret anymore. But for that, I have to go to a higher level of consciousness and see. From the ground level, I can't see. If I go to the first floor, I can see much more. I go to the seventh floor, I see everything around me. And if I sit in the International Space Station, then I see the whole world. So it depends. Spiritual height is very similar to the physical height. When you go up, your view becomes, you see the whole world at one time. Okay? So this self-existence reveals itself again in three terms of its essential nature. So now he is giving you that Brahman, Purusheshwar, Maya, Prakriti, Sakshi. We'll identify the words. Self. Okay? When the word self is used, he means the Brahman consciousness which is impersonal. You can also use the word nirvana. So self always means at the higher mind level, the consciousness which is static, infinite, eternal, featureless. These 4 words, if you remember, the consciousness is clear. It is a consciousness. It is fully conscious. It is static, no power. It is static. There's no movement at all in it. And it is eternal, infinite, and featureless. You can't describe it. Without any characteristics. Like plain water moving everywhere without movement at all, which is absolutely transparent. Something like that. Okay? So, that's his self. So, that's the first one corresponding to the Brahman consciousness. Then you have the conscious being or spirit. There is the Purusha. There is a Purusha consciousness. It becomes personal. The self is impersonal. The next is the conscious being and spirit. There is the Purusha. And finally, God and the divine being. God or the divine being is the Ishvara consciousness. Now we can use the word God because God is personal as well as impersonal. And that's the supramental level. So you can say there are 3 levels. Level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 is where we are seeing the many and thinking it is real. We are in ignorance. Level 2, you start seeing the oneness of things. Level 3, both are possible. All the contradictions of the physical world are harmonized in that level. So, he has used the word self. So, self is very clearly Brahman consciousness. You can also say Atman. You can also say Nirvana. Nirvana is the description of it in the Buddhistic literature. Okay? So, and there is the next is the Purusha. I skipped. Next is the conscious being or spirit. There is the Purusha. The individual, the conscious being which is personal, the personal aspect of the divine. And the third one, God or the divine being. Now Srimad is saying Indian words are more satisfactory. The terms are more satisfactory. Brahman, the reality, is Atman, corresponding to the self. Okay? Purusha is a conscious being or spirit. And Ishvara is God or the divine being. The word Ishvara is very satisfying because Ishvara means master, Lord. So he is not only Purusha. He is absolutely master of what he is creating. He is personal and impersonal at the same time. Okay? So he has given the correspondences. Then we go to the next phrase. For these terms grew from a root of intuition, and while they have a comprehensive preciseness, are capable of a plastic application which avoids both vagueness in the use and the rigid snare of a too limiting intellectual concept. That's what we were discussing before, that you can't say that the Purusha is at this level. It's flexible. And yet it's very clear. Purusha is a conscious being. He can be experienced in many planes. So, Ramakrishna was experiencing the personal aspect of the Divine Mother. He was constantly talking. He never knew about the impersonal aspect until he was made to have that experience. So that came later. For Srimad it was the opposite. For Srimad, first he had the impersonal aspect of the Divine. The personal aspect came in jail many years later. Okay? So Srimad is saying these words are very satisfactory. So we have a comprehensive preciseness, are capable of a plastic application which avoids both vagueness in the use. We saw very clearly. There is no vagueness at all. No? Ishvara is the master, the Lord, like a king, ruling his kingdom. Very clear. And Purusha is the individual being, personal aspect. And the Brahman is the impersonal aspect. Some children ask, can you please explain what is impersonal? Okay? So you have to tell them, like the wind. It's a force, but there is nobody there. There is, but you don't see that, okay? There is a wind god. That's a different matter. That's a different subject. Then, the sunlight is impersonal. Okay? The ocean seems to be impersonal. So that's the impersonality. Infinite, eternal, but without any conscious being directing or anything. Absence of a conscious being. Impersonal aspect. So, I go to the next sentence. The Supreme Brahman is that which in Western metaphysics is called the Absolute. So, when you say Absolute, you can't describe it in any way, you can't limit it in any way. If you limit it, it becomes a relative. It can't be the Absolute. So, the Absolute is that which is indefinable. You can experience it, but you can't define it. But Brahman is at the same time the omnipresent reality in which all that is relative exists as its forms or its movements. So, that's exactly the point. This Brahman can be all the three. He can, at every 3 levels, he can be everything. Again, we come back to the concept of ice, water, water vapor. Totally 3 different forms. Okay? So, the Supreme Brahman is that which in Western metaphysics is called the Absolute. But Brahman is at the same time the omnipresent reality in which all that is relative exists as its forms or its movements. The relative world is the physical world. Because when you have a relation with something, there must be 2. So relative means the world of multiplicity, the many. You can't have relativity at the highest level because there's only one. Okay? So this is an absolute. Brahman is an absolute which takes all relativities in its embrace. So you come back to the idea of the seed and the tree. The tree has got the many forms and movements. Leaves, fruits, flowers, twigs, branches, roots, bark, everything. But in the seed, it's only one, you don't see. But that seed, Brahman, can become the tree. It can become everything else. So, we have to have flexible understanding of the two. The seed and the tree are totally different and yet they are the same essentially. That's why you say, essentially, everything is only one. From the outer level, from the outer point of view, it is not one. Multiplicity. This is an absolute which takes all relativities in its embrace. The Upanishads affirm that all this is the Brahman. Mind is Brahman, life is Brahman, matter is Brahman. Addressing Vayu, the Lord of Air, of life, it is said, O Vayu, thou art manifest Brahman. And pointing to man and beast and bird and insect, each separately is identified with the one. O Brahman, which is one, thou art this old man and boy and girl, this bird, this insect. Brahman is a consciousness that knows itself in all that exists. It's fully conscious of itself in everything. Brahman is a force that sustains the power of God and Titan and demon. The force that acts in man and animal and the forms and energies of nature. So he is everything. Brahman is the Ananda, the secret bliss of existence, which is the ether of our being and without which none could breathe or live. This is from the Taittiriya Upanishad. Okay? Brahman is the inner soul in all. It has taken a form in correspondence with each created form it inhabits. The Lord of beings, this is at the highest level, Lord of beings, is that which is conscious in the conscious being. So we are conscious beings and the Lord is there within us. That's the psychic being which is a representative of the divine. So we have the divine within us. Conscious in the conscious being. But he is also the conscious in inconscient things. He is there in the stone also. Okay? So the one who is master and in control of the many that are passive in the hands of force nature. He is the timeless and time. Timeless in spirit and time in matter. He is space and all that space is in space. He is causality and the cause and the effect. So, he is a thinker and his thought, the warrior and his courage, the gambler and his dice throw. This is from the Gita also. Okay? All realities and all aspects and all semblances are the Brahman. Brahman is the absolute, the transcendent and incommunicable, the supracosmic existence that sustains the cosmos, the cosmic self that upholds all beings, but it is too the self of each individual. So here exactly he is saying the three levels are there. It is first of all the transcendent. When we speak of the transcendent, it is divine in himself without the manifestation. When you experience the transcendent, only the divine is there. Srinath sometimes uses the word to experience the divine in himself. The world doesn't exist then at that level. But he creates the world. Okay? So, that's the transcendent and incommunicable, the supracosmic existence above the cosmos that sustains the cosmos. He is the one that sustains it. The cosmic self that upholds all beings. But it is too the self in each individual. So you have the transcendent, the cosmic and the individual. And he is there at all levels. Okay? So the soul or psychic entity is an eternal portion of the Ishvara. This is from the Gita. Okay? The psychic entity is an eternal portion of the Ishvara. It is his supreme nature of consciousness that has become the living being in a world of living beings. Okay? Yeah. Para Prakriti Jiva Bhuta. The Jiva is the individual being, and Para Prakriti, the supreme nature, has become the individual being. That's from the Gita. Okay? The world of living being. The Brahman alone is, and because of it, all are. For all are the Brahman. This reality is the reality of everything that we see in self and nature. So, self and nature. Self is level 2, and nature is level 1. Okay? The normal thing that we see in the physical world. Brahman, the Ishvara, is all this by his Yoga Maya. So, Yoga Maya is the power of the divine to create things. That's what it means. But if you are at a lower level, you see it as illusion. And when you are at another level, you see it as mechanical energy. And when you are at the highest level, it's your own power. So, Yoga Maya. The word Maya comes from the root Ma, which means to measure and limit. When you want to manifest something, you have to limit it. Without limiting it, you can't manifest it. Okay? So, that's the Maya is coming from there. The power of his consciousness force, Chit Shakti, put out in self-manifestation. He is a conscious being. So not only he is the transcendent, but he is also the conscious being, which is the Purusha. Soul, spirit, Purusha. And it is by his nature, the force of his conscious self-existence, that he is all things. This is the, by his nature, Purusha Prakriti. Then he comes to the Ishvara, the last one, highest one. He is the Ishvara, the omniscient and omnipotent, all ruler, like an individual king who is ruling his kingdom. And it is by his Shakti. Now, the force becomes his own Shakti. Okay? His conscious power that he manifests himself in time and governs the universe. These and similar statements taken together are all comprehensive. It is possible for the mind to cut and select. That's what all philosophies do. When you go to the Brahman consciousness, Buddhism stops there. Okay? And when you go to the Sankhya philosophy, they stop at the Purusha Prakriti experience. And when you go to the Ishvara consciousness, you have the Gita experience, the philosophy of the Gita, and Srimdo also. So, but Srimdo includes all and says all are true at different levels. The others are fighting it out among themselves. This is true, that is true. But Srimdo says all are true at their own level. Okay? So. These and similar statements taken together are all comprehensive. It is possible for the mind to cut and select, to build a closed system and explain away all that does not fit with it, depending on what experience you have had. But it is on the complete and many-sided statement that we must take our stand if we have to acquire an integral knowledge. When he says we, he says we who are expounding the integral philosophy, his own philosophy. It's not a general we, it's our. He's saying, he's not using the word mine, but that's what it means. So, huge para explaining the three levels and their corresponding things in the physical world, spirit and matter. So when you are in the Brahman consciousness, the world is illusion. When you are in the Purusha consciousness slightly higher, you are seeing the physical world as mechanical energy, prakriti. And when you are at the Ishvara level, you are a master. It's your own power that you are seeing.
I would like to share something
Yes.
that is not exactly in keeping with this, but it is the Brahman. There was a lady in the ashram who was about to pass away. I would go to her regularly. I would sing Om with her, and she would sing Om to me in her dying stages. So one night, Aurobindo Basu asked to go with me to see her. And as I was looking at her and she was looking at me, I received something from the heights, and I said, Mother says it is okay if you want to leave now. And I said, Mother Sri Aurobindo, Mother Sri Aurobindo, Mother Sri Aurobindo. And we both left. And Aurobindo Basu said to me, at the very end, you must say Brahman. And he said it, and she left within a few hours.
When you were present.
Yeah. The power of Brahman.
An absolute, eternal and infinite self-existence, self-awareness, self-delight of being that secretly supports and pervades the universe, even while it is also beyond it, is then the first truth of spiritual experience. Okay? So this is the Satchidananda. Sat, Chit, Ananda. Self-existence, Sat. Self-awareness, Chit. Self-delight, Ananda. Of being that secretly supports and pervades the universe, even while it is also beyond it. So it can take different stands. It's not one thing like us. If I am here, I cannot be elsewhere. But the divine can be elsewhere also at the same time. Okay? But this truth of being has at once an impersonal and a personal aspect. It is not only existence, it is the one being, absolute, eternal and infinite. Okay. As there are three fundamental aspects in which we meet this reality: self, conscious being or spirit and God, the divine being, or to use the Indian terms, the absolute and omnipresent reality, Brahman, manifest to us as Atman, Purusha, Ishvara. So, the three levels, Brahman, Purusha, Ishvara. So too, its power of consciousness appears to us in three aspects. It is the self-force of that consciousness, conceptively creative of all things. Conceptively creative. Okay? Not materially, conceptively creative. And conception is not only mind, it can also be spiritual power. Okay? Conceptively creating. Of all things, Maya. It is Prakriti. Maya is the first one. It is Prakriti, nature or force, made dynamically executive, working out all things under the witnessing eye of the conscious being, the self or spirit. It is the conscious power of the divine being, Shakti, this is the third. which is both conceptively creative and dynamically executive of all the divine workings. Okay? We'll discuss these things in detail when we read it next time. So, conceptively creative and dynamically executive of all the divine workings. These three aspects and their powers base and comprise the whole of existence and all nature, and taken together as a single whole, they reconcile the apparent disparateness and incompatibility of the supracosmic transcendence, the cosmic universality, and the separativeness of our individual existence. So, God can be experienced in three ways: transcendent, cosmic, and individual. And we'll discuss it later. Three ways of seeing God. The absolute cosmic nature and ourselves are linked in oneness by the triune aspect of the one reality. For, taken by itself, the existence of the Absolute, the Supreme Brahman, would be a contradiction of the relative universe, and our own real existence would be incompatible with its sole incommunicable reality. But the Brahman is at the same time omnipresent in all relativities. It is the Absolute, independent of all relatives, the Absolute basing all relatives, the Absolute governing, pervading, constituting all relatives. There is nothing that is not the omnipresent reality. In observing the triple aspect and the triple power, we come to see how this is possible. So, this is what we'll see. Good deal of discussion is needed again to clarify the whole thing. But he has told you very clearly now, there are three levels. There is level 1 where you are in a Brahman consciousness and you see the physical world as unreal. He is not talking about normal consciousness. He is talking about spiritual experience. Normal consciousness, we see the physical world and it is real to us. That's not what he is discussing at all. So, you go to the higher mind level and it starts from there. So, when you are in the higher mind, you are in a Brahman consciousness. Featureless, infinite, eternal, immutable. No change, static and featureless. No characteristics. And then you see the physical world as unreal. Purusha consciousness, you go up, you are now seeing the divine in a personal aspect. He is a conscious being. The world becomes mechanical energy. And mechanical unconscious energy. You are conscious, but the world is unconscious. Movement. Third level, all these are combined. The God, the divine is a king, ruling his own kingdom. And he has the power. He has knowledge as well as power, consciousness as well as Shakti. That's the truth of in our Indian iconoclasm, the images in the temples, Ardhanarishwara, half man, half woman. Consciousness and power in one form. That's his supramental. So,
this leap from the physical mind to the higher mind seems to be the greatest leap we can make.
From the physical mind you can't go to the higher mind. You normally go to the vital mind and then you go to the pure mind. In the physical world itself, there is the physical mind is what you call the manas in our Indian philosophy. That is the part of the brain which is interpreting your senses. That's all. It has no other function. Okay? So, the physical mind, Sridhar also calls it the vital mind. He calls it the material mind. He calls it's the brain that is interpreting the images that you're seeing. This is a thing that is very important we have to realize. I am not experiencing the physical world at all. I am experiencing an image in the mind. If my mind goes silent, the world disappears. Its reality disappears. There is no interpretation. This we have discussed many times. Again, I am repeating that. I am seeing the physical world only because of my senses. If my senses are not there, the world doesn't exist for me. Clear? So, but the senses also, there are two other things. There's a nerve carrying the sense data. The picture that is falling on my retina, it is carrying the data and taking it to the brain. And the brain is telling you what you are seeing. So until the brain is programmed to interpret what you are seeing, the world doesn't make any sense to you. Like the baby, the newborn baby, all his senses are working. But the brain has not yet been programmed to interpret. He understands nothing. His own mother, the language that they are speaking, understands nothing at all. So the programming of the brain comes a little later, and in the experience of the Brahman, the mind goes on a holiday, says, I don't want to interpret anymore. So when there is no interpretation, the world becomes unreal. That pure data without interpretation.
So then you spoke of the vital mind before you can get into the higher mind.
That's at our level. The vital mind is where you have desires, where there's an urge for action. That's a vital mind. Then there's a pure mind, which is logic, which is objective. And you are trying to learn things without the interference of your emotions and your bodily needs. You don't let your hunger and your sleep affect your mind, thinking. Normally it does. When I'm hungry, my mind may not work very well. When I'm sleepy, my mind won't work very well. So, and when I have a desire, the desire is coloring my mind and not making it impartial. But that part of the mind which is impartial and can judge things accurately and observe things accurately is the pure mind. And Sri Aurobindo says the pure mind is not at all common in humanity. It's quite rare.
So one begins at the physical mind.
That's right.
Goes to the vital mind.
Yes.
And then the pure mind.
Yes.
The pure mind, one can go to the higher mind?
The pure mind has to fall silent. Then you go to the higher mind.
Okay.
The thoughts disappear.
Yeah.
Only the power of the mind to understand and know becomes much purer when there is no disturbance. The thoughts are the disturbance. It's like the sea which is in motion. But when the motion is not there, the water becomes transparent and you start seeing clarity, clearly. So that's a higher mind.
Thank you. Namaskar to all.